The village slept under a quiet sky. The air was cold, and the stars twinkled like tiny sparks on black velvet. In the middle of this simple life, a boy named Kale worked in the stables. He was nothing special. Small, thin, with messy hair and calloused hands, he swept the floors, fed the horses, and cleaned the stalls. Everyone in the village knew him as the stable boy. Everyone except for the dragons. For years, dragons were only stories. Ancient legends whispered in old books and around fire pits. People said dragons were gone, extinct. But Kale always believed. Sometimes he thought he heard wings in the wind, or shadows moving between the mountains. He laughed at his own imagination. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something waited beyond the stars. That night, Kale noticed a strange glow in the sky. A meteor shower, he thought at first, but these sparks were different. They danced and twisted, glowing like living fire. The stars seemed to fall closer, as if they were calling to him. Kale's heart raced. Something ancient and alive stirred in the distance, something he could not name. As he walked toward the stables, he heard a soft whimper. From behind the barn, a tiny creature emerged. It was not a horse, not a wolf. Kale froze. A dragon hatchling, no bigger than a dog, shook on the cold ground. Its scales shimmered like molten silver, and its eyes glowed like embers. Kale's breath caught. Dragons were supposed to be extinct, but here one lay before him, trembling and weak. Kale didn't hesitate. He scooped the hatchling into his arms. "It's okay," he whispered. "I won't let anything hurt you." The dragon nudged him gently, as if it understood. The air around them seemed to hum. Kale felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was not fear, not excitement, but a deep, ancient recognition. Something in the dragon's eyes told him that their meeting was not by chance. The night grew colder. Stars burned brighter. Kale looked up, and his heart skipped a beat. Shadows moved between the mountains, larger shapes than birds, too heavy for the wind. The dragons were coming. He could feel it. His small village, his simple life was about to change forever. By the time he returned to the barn, he knew he could not hide the hatchling. He set it down gently, and it curled near the hay. He watched, amazed, as the fire from the sky reflected on its scales. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. Kale spun around and froze. A massive dragon hovered above the field, wings wide, scales dark as night. His eyes glowed like molten gold. Kale's legs shook. He had never imagined anything so magnificent, so terrifying. The dragon landed softly, though the ground trembled beneath its weight. Studied him. Kale held his breath. For a long moment, the dragon said nothing, but Kale could feel a question burning in its gaze. Then, it bent its massive head, lowering it toward him. He could not believe it. The ancient creature, taller than a house, bowed its head to a simple boy. Kale felt the same warmth, the same deep recognition he felt with the hatchling. Something in him awakened, something old and powerful. The dragons were not just creatures. They were sentinels of a world he had never known. And now they had chosen him. The wind shifted, and the night seemed alive with whispers. The sky glowed brighter, as if the stars themselves were watching. Kale felt a mixture of fear and awe. His life was over as he knew it, yet a new life waited. He didn't understand what would happen next. He only knew that the dragons, legends of fire and sky, had noticed him, and that was the first spark of something extraordinary. He spent the rest of the night near the hatchling, keeping watch over it as the massive dragon circled above. The stars fell like fire, and the mountains echoed with the sound of wings. Kale realized that he was no longer just a stable boy. Something ancient, something powerful had chosen him, and whatever was coming, he would face it with dragons at his side. Before dawn, the massive dragon disappeared into the sky, leaving only the hatchling at Kale's side. He looked at the creature and smiled, though fear still lingered. "I don't know what this means yet," he whispered. "But I think this is just the beginning." The sky was quiet again. The village still slept. But Kale knew the world had changed. The dragons were coming, and so was his destiny. He had been nothing, but the fire of the ancient dragons had chosen him. And soon the world would bow to what was coming. The sun rose over the village, painting the fields with pale gold. Kale woke before anyone else, still cradling the silver-scaled hatchling. The dragon's tiny wings fluttered as if it already knew he was its protector. Kale felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. The night had changed everything, but he did not understand how. He went to the village elder, an old man with deep wrinkles and eyes that seemed to see the past. Elder Miran had always told stories of dragons, of fire and sky, of humans who once walked alongside them. Most villagers laughed at the tales, calling them old nonsense. But Kale felt that the elder might hold the key to what was happening. Miran listened quietly as Kale described the hatchling, the massive dragon that had bowed, and the glowing stars. The elder's eyes widened. "Kale," he said slowly, "you have seen what others have only dreamed of. The dragons have returned, but they do not come for you by chance. Something in you calls to them. Something ancient." Kale frowned. "Me? I'm just a stable boy. Why would dragons, legendary dragons, choose me?" The elder shook his head. "There is more to your bloodline than you know. Long ago, humans and dragons were bound. Only those who carry the spark of the ancients can be recognized. You may be one of them." Kale's mind swirled. Bloodline? Spark of the ancients? It sounded impossible. Yet, he could not ignore the truth he had seen with his own eyes. He had touched a dragon, and it had not recoiled. He had felt something ancient awaken inside him. As he walked back to the stable, the hatchling on his shoulder, Kale noticed something strange. Shadows moved in the mountains, darker than the morning mist. A group of figures, humans but unlike anyone he had ever seen, watched the village from afar. Their eyes glimmered with curiosity and danger. Kale's heart tightened. Whatever the dragons were, others wanted them too. And not everyone would respect them. Kale spent the day observing the hatchling. It was quick to learn, following him, mimicking his movements and responding to his voice. When he spoke, the dragon seemed to understand the meaning behind his words. When he touched its scales, warmth spread through him, and he could feel a pulse of something vast, something old. That evening, Kale returned to the mountains alone, following a whisper in the wind. The elder had told him that the dragon's return was tied to ancient places, places where humans had once walked with them. The mountain cave, hidden behind thick vines and jagged rocks, pulsed with energy. Inside, old markings glowed faintly, as if they remembered the dragons and their human allies. Kale traced the symbols with his fingers. Suddenly, the cave shivered. A voice echoed in his mind, soft, melodic, and strange. "Kale, chosen one, protector of the fire." Kale stumbled backward, almost dropping the hatchling. His heart raced. The voice was not human, not dragon, but something older, wiser. The markings glowed brighter, and he felt a surge of power in his chest. The hatchling chirped, wings spreading, as if sensing the same presence. Kale realized the dragons were trying to communicate, to guide him. But guide him to what? He did not know. All he knew was that he was no longer just a boy. He was part of something much larger, something dangerous, and something extraordinary. Night fell again. The mountains whispered with secrets, the wind carrying stories older than humanity. Kale sat by the cave, the hatchling curled beside him. He could hear distant roars, the wings of dragons brushing the sky. Each sound was a promise, a warning, and a call to destiny. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on his young shoulders, yet excitement burned like fire. Suddenly, a shadow passed over him. Kale looked up and froze. A massive dragon, larger than any building in the village, circled the cave. Its scales shimmered with colors that seemed to shift like the sky itself. Kale's heart pounded. The dragon landed gracefully, head held high. It spoke, not in words, but through a pulse of thought. "The others are coming. You must be ready." Kale swallowed hard. "The others? Who?" The dragon's golden eyes glimmered. Hunters, seekers, those who would take our power for themselves. You have the spark. They will want it. You must not fail. Kale's hands shook. He had never faced danger like this. He had never led, never fought, never commanded anything. And now, the survival of the dragons, perhaps even the balance of the world, rested on him. The hatchling chirped, nudging him, as if saying, "You are not alone." Kale looked at the small dragon, then at the massive one. Fear churned in his stomach, but determination burned brighter. He had been nothing, but now, whispers of the ancients guided him, dragons watched him, and danger loomed. He could no longer be the boy who swept stables. He had a destiny. That night, Kale lay in the cave, the hatchling asleep on his chest. Outside, the wind carried the distant roars and whispers of dragons, of hunters, of powers older than the stars. He closed his eyes, trying to calm the storm in his mind. The world was bigger, wilder, and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. And yet, Kale smiled. For the first time in his life, he felt alive. He felt powerful. He felt chosen. Tomorrow, he thought, he would take his first steps toward that power. He would listen to the dragons, learn their ways, and face the dangers that waited. The ancient whisper had chosen him, and he would answer. The mountains were silent now, but Kale knew the night was only the beginning. The fire of the dragons had returned, and with it, a boy who was no longer nothing. The sun rose over the village again, but Kale did not feel its warmth. His mind was full of dragons, whispers, and warnings. He had spent the night in the cave with the hatchling, learning its ways, feeling its pulse, and sensing the bond that was forming between them. He had touched something ancient, something alive, and it had touched him back. Today would be different. Today he would begin training. Elder Miran had left him old scrolls, maps of hidden valleys, and stories of the ancients. The elders spoke of trials that humans once faced alongside dragons. Trials of courage, wisdom, and heart. Kale had never been brave. He had never led anyone or anything. But he knew he had to try. The hatchling chirped, wings fluttering, ready to follow him. Kale took a deep breath and stepped into the mountains. The wind was colder here, sharper, as if it tested his resolve. Shadows moved in the distance, the shapes of dragons unseen but sensed. The hatchling flew ahead, circling him, guiding him deeper into the wild. Kale reached a narrow ridge. The scrolls had warned of this place. The trial of fire. A dragon would judge his courage here, testing him not with words, but with challenge. Kale's stomach twisted. He had faced nothing like this in his life. But he took a step forward, the hatchling by his side, his heart pounding in rhythm with the mountains. Suddenly, the ground trembled. From the cliff below, a dragon emerged, massive and powerful, scales red and black, eyes burning like coals. Kale froze. The dragon's wings stretched wide, casting a shadow over the ridge. It roared, a sound that shook the stones beneath his feet. The air was hot, filled with the scent of fire and smoke. The hatchling chirped nervously, but Kale steadied it. He remembered the elder's words. Fear is a test. Courage is the path. He stepped forward. I am not here to harm you, he said softly. I only wish to learn. The dragon tilted its massive head, as if studying him. Then, without warning, it leapt forward, flames shooting from its mouth. Kale dove to the side, heart racing, narrowly avoiding the fire. The hatchling screeched and hid behind his legs. The dragon circled again, testing him, each pass more aggressive. Kale realized this was not just a test of bravery. It was a test of mind and instinct. He could not fight the dragon with strength. He had none. He had to think, to move, to anticipate. He remembered the hatchling's movements, the way it responded to his voice. He could use the same bond. He took a deep breath. Steady, watch me. The hatchling flapped beside him. He moved slowly, predicting the dragon's flight path, dodging the flames, staying calm. He could feel the heat on his face, the roar shaking his chest, yet he did not panic. Each step, each movement, connected him more to the dragons, to something ancient within him. After what felt like hours, the dragon suddenly stopped mid-air, hovering, eyes locked on Kale. The flames ceased. Kale's heart pounded, sweat running down his face. The dragon circled once, then lowered its massive head, letting out a low rumble. Kale understood. The trial was complete. The dragon had judged him, and he had passed. The hatchling chirped excitedly, and Kale smiled, relief washing over him. He had faced fear, fire, and fury, and he had survived. More than that, he had learned that he was capable of more than he ever imagined. The dragons were not just creatures of legend. They were allies, guides, and now teachers. But there was no time to celebrate. The mountains whispered again, carrying sounds that made Kale's blood run cold. Shadows moved faster than before. Figures, humans, but unlike any he had seen, were watching. They carried weapons designed for dragons, tools meant to capture or kill. Kale realized the danger Moran had warned about was closer than ever. He returned to the village as quickly as he could, the hatchling riding on his shoulder. Every step was heavy with tension, every rustle of wind a reminder of the threat approaching. The villagers looked at him with confusion and fear, unaware of the ancient power stirring among them. Kale did not explain. He only prepared. That night, he trained the hatchling again, teaching it to respond to commands, to follow signals, to stay close. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing hour. Kale began to sense more, movements in the shadows, the whispers in the wind, even the faint heartbeat of dragons hidden far in the mountains. He realized that the world was alive in ways he had never imagined. Then, as he rested, a shadow fell over the village. Kale looked up and froze. A massive dragon, dark as the night, circled above. Its wings beat with power that could crush buildings, its eyes glimmering with intelligence and authority. Behind it, more shapes moved. Smaller dragons, watchers, guardians of a world Kale was only beginning to understand. Kale felt a shiver run down his spine. He had passed the trial of fire, but the real trials were just beginning. The whispers of the ancients were not finished. Danger loomed closer, more cunning and more powerful than anything he had faced. And yet, for the first time, Kale did not feel fear alone. He felt the spark of something old, something mighty, something that told him he could rise to meet it. He looked at the hatchling, wings fluttering softly. "We're not alone," he whispered, "and we will be ready." The night was quiet now, but Kale knew the world had changed forever. He was no longer just a stable boy. He was a student, a warrior, a protector of something ancient. And the dragons, the fire of the ancients, were his allies. Tomorrow he thought he would face new trials. But tonight he would rest. For the first time, he understood that he was part of a story much larger than himself. A story of dragons, fire, and a boy who was no longer nothing. The sky darkened earlier than usual, the wind carrying an unusual chill. Kale stood on the ridge overlooking the village, the hatchling perched on his shoulder. The bond between them had grown stronger each day, but so had the weight on Kale's shoulders. The whispers of the ancients were louder now, and their warnings sharper. Something was coming, something dangerous. For weeks, he had trained in secret with the hatchling, learning to communicate, anticipate, and act. He had begun to sense the movements of dragons even when they were far away, their wings stirring the air, their presence a quiet vibration beneath the earth. But this was different. The mountains carried new sounds. Shadows moving too fast, shapes too human, weapons too sharp. Kale's heart raced. He had seen them once before, strange hunters who watched from the distance. Now they were closer, figures dressed in dark armor, faces hidden, moving through the forests with the silence of ghosts. Kale realized they were not ordinary humans. These were hunters trained to capture or kill dragons, humans who would take the fire of the ancients for themselves. The hatchling chirped nervously, sensing the tension. Kale placed a hand on its shimmering scales. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We will face them together." The first shadow appeared near the village edge. Kale froze as he saw the figure raise a strange device, glowing with energy. The device pulsed, scanning, searching for life. Not human life, but the life of dragons. Kale's stomach twisted. He had known danger was coming, but this was more than he had imagined. He ran toward the cave where the hatchling had first met him, hoping to guide the dragon to safety. But before he reached it, a roar echoed from the mountains. Massive wings beat against the sky, sending gusts of wind down the valley. The hunters froze. They had not expected the dragons to arrive. A massive dragon, scales black and gold, descended from the clouds, eyes glowing like molten fire. Its roar shook the trees and stones. Kale's breath caught. He had never seen such power in motion. Behind it, smaller dragons emerged from hidden cliffs and valleys, forming a circle around the village. The hunters had underestimated them. Kale realized then that he was not just a boy who trained with one hatchling. He was a leader now. The dragons responded to him, not fully, but enough to follow his instincts and courage. He raised his hands, speaking softly, feeling the bond. Protect the village. Protect the hatchling. Stand with me. The hunters moved forward, devices glowing, trying to capture the dragons. The massive dragon swooped down, claws tearing the ground, wings creating a windstorm. Kale's heart pounded, but he stayed calm. He directed the hatchling, guiding it to distract one of the hunters. The little dragon darted and flared its tiny flames, forcing the hunter to retreat. It was a test, Kale realized, not just of courage but of leadership. He had to think quickly, act decisively, and trust the dragons. Each movement mattered, each choice could save lives or end them. The hunters regrouped, more determined now. Kale could feel their intelligence, their planning. They were not mindless. They were a threat that required every ounce of his focus. Suddenly, a shadow fell across him. Another massive dragon landed nearby, scales silver like moonlight. Its eyes met Kale's, and for a moment, he felt the same recognition he had felt the night the first dragon bowed. This was not just a creature of power. It was a sentinel, an ally, a teacher. Kale realized the dragons had chosen him not only for courage but for wisdom, for judgment, for the ability to unite them against danger. The battle began. Flames lit the sky as dragons clashed with the hunters' devices. Trees burned, winds howled, and Kale ran between the chaos, guiding, observing, commanding. Fear tried to creep into his mind, but he pushed it back. He was not a boy anymore. He was a protector, a master of fire, even if only in part. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed twisted in the roar of wings and fire. The hunters fell back, devices destroyed or captured by clever movements of the dragons. Kale's muscles ached, his chest burned, but he kept going. He knew that this was only the beginning. The hunters were clever, persistent, and ruthless. They would return. As night fell, the dragons gathered around Kale and the hatchling. The massive black and gold dragon lowered its head, nudging him gently. Kale understood. This was respect, trust, and acknowledgement of his leadership. The silver dragon circled once, then vanished into the shadows. Kale realized the dragons were not just powerful. They were alive, thinking, and willing to follow him. The village was safe for now, but Kale knew the hunters would come again. Stronger, smarter, more dangerous. He looked at the hatchling, wings tired but eyes alert. "We survived today," he whispered. "But tomorrow we must be ready for more." The stars began to glow above, calm after the storm. Yet Kale felt the pulse of the mountains, the whispers of the ancients, and the shadows of the hunters closing in. His journey was only beginning. He had faced fire, shadow, and cunning, but the greatest challenges were yet to come. For the first time, Kale felt the weight of destiny pressing down, heavy but alive. He had passed the trials of courage, faced enemies, and begun to lead dragons. He was no longer nothing. He was the rising shadow, the spark of fire in a world that had forgotten the power of humans and dragons together. And somewhere, in the distance, the wind carried a low, haunting roar, a signal that the trials were far from over, and the danger would rise even higher. The dawn broke with a red glow, as if the sky itself burned. Kale stood on the ridge, the hatchling perched on his shoulder, wings twitching nervously. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on him. The hunters had retreated, but they would return. He could feel it in the air, in the vibrations of the mountains, and in the restless roars of dragons far above. Today would be different. Today Kale would lead. The hatchling chirped, sensing his tension, nudging him for reassurance. Kale placed a hand on its scales, feeling warmth ripple through him. "We face them together," he whispered. "This is the day they learn not to underestimate us." From the mountain peaks, dragons began to descend. Massive wings cut through the morning light, casting shadows over the village. Kale could sense their power, their awareness, and their trust in him. The massive black and gold dragon from the previous night circled above, and behind it, dozens of others followed. Some small, some enormous, all ancient and magnificent. Kale took a deep breath. This was no longer a test. This was the real confrontation. The hunters were returning, and they were not alone. From the forest edges, dark armored figures advanced, carrying strange energy weapons and nets designed for dragons. Their eyes glinted with greed and calculation. Kale's stomach tightened, but he did not falter. He had a bond now, a connection to forces older and stronger than he had ever imagined. The battle began. The hunters fired their weapons, but the dragons moved with agility and precision beyond human expectation. Flames lit the sky as dragons swooped and dived, their roars shaking the trees. Kale ran between the chaos, directing the hatchling, calling commands with voice and thought. The little dragon darted ahead, creating diversions, drawing hunters into traps. Kale realized he was no longer just a follower. He was a strategist, a commander of fire and sky. One hunter, braver or perhaps more foolish than the others, fired a device aimed directly at the hatchling. Kale leaped, grabbing the little dragon and rolling out of the blast radius. The air hummed with energy as sparks fell to the ground. Flames licked the trees, but Kale stayed focused. "You won't take them," he shouted, voice carrying over the roar of wings. The massive dragons roared in response, attacking with coordinated precision. Claws shredded weapons, fire scorched the ground, and hunters were forced to retreat or fall. Kale felt a surge of power in himself, as if the dragons shared their strength with him. Every movement, every choice was amplified by the bond he had formed. Hours passed in a blur of fire, wind, and chaos. Kale had learned more in this single battle than he ever could have in years. He had felt fear, courage, doubt, and determination all at once. Yet through it all, he never wavered. The dragons responded to him, trusting him to lead, to guide, to protect. Then, from the clouds above, a massive shadow descended. A dragon of legend, scales shining like starlight, larger than any Kale had seen, landed in the valley. Its eyes glowed with ancient wisdom. The hunters froze, terror spreading among them. The legendary dragon bowed its massive head toward Kale. He understood instantly. The dragons recognized him not only as protector but as a leader, as one chosen by the ancients. Kale's chest swelled with pride and determination. He raised his hands, and the dragons responded, forming a protective circle around the village and the hatchling. Flames streaked through the sky, wings cut the air with power unimaginable, and the hunters had no choice but to retreat. The valley shook with the roar of dragons, the pulse of fire, and the force of something older than humans themselves. When the battle ended, Kale stood alone on the ridge, the hatchling perched loyally on his shoulder, exhausted but alive. The villagers began to emerge, eyes wide with awe and fear. They had witnessed something extraordinary. Dragons, fire, and a boy leading them. Kale realized they had never truly understood the legends, the stories of humans who once walked alongside dragons. Now they saw it for themselves. The legendary dragon landed beside Kale, its eyes locking with his. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. The bond had been recognized, the power awakened, and the path forward had been chosen. Kale had proven himself, but he knew the war was not over. This was only the beginning. As night fell, Kale looked at the stars, thinking of the whispers of the ancients and the dragons watching from the skies. The hunters would return, stronger, smarter, more dangerous. But Kale was ready. He had faced fire, shadow, and cunning. He had led dragons. He had become something more than a stable boy. The hatchling chirped softly, curling against his chest. Kale smiled. "We did it," he whispered. "But tomorrow we rise even higher." And somewhere in the darkness, distant roars echoed, reminding Kale that the dragons of legend were still alive, still watching, and still waiting for him to fulfill the destiny that had chosen him. The call of fire had been answered, and Kale, once nothing, was now the spark that could light a world. The sky was alive with stars and fire. Kale stood on the mountain ridge, the hatchling perched on his shoulder, wings twitching nervously. The village below lay quiet, safe for now. But Kale knew this was the moment that would define everything. The dragons of legend had returned, and today they would reveal their true power and their trust in him. From the peaks, massive dragons descended in perfect formation. Scales shimmered like molten metal, wings cutting through the sky with thunderous force. Kale could feel their presence in every step, every breath. They were watching him, not as beasts, but as allies, as beings who had waited centuries for someone worthy to stand among them. The hunters, returning with weapons stronger than before, appeared on the valley floor. They had learned from their previous failures and now moved with caution, scanning the skies, trying to anticipate the dragon's next moves. Kale's stomach tightened, but fear was tempered by the knowledge he had gained. He had trained, learned, and led. He was ready. He raised his hands, speaking softly, feeling the bond pulse through him. "Stand with me," he whispered. The hatchling chirped, wings flaring. Then, as if the words carried magic, the dragons reacted. Massive wings flared, claws dug into the earth, and fire lit the sky in waves of color and power. The hunters attacked first, devices glowing, trying to capture or harm. But the dragons moved with precision beyond imagination. Flames streaked the sky, winds tore at the valley, and the hunters were thrown back again and again. Kale directed them with voice and thought, guiding the hatchling, signaling the larger dragons, predicting moves before they were made. He was no longer a boy. He was the spark of the ancients, the chosen protector of dragons. Then it happened. From the clouds above, the largest dragon Kale had ever seen descended. Its scales shimmered like the night sky, eyes glowing with the wisdom of centuries. It landed gracefully, head held high, wings folding around it like a protective cloak. Kale's breath caught. This was a dragon of legends, older than anything in the stories, a being of immense power. The dragon lowered its massive head slowly. Kale understood immediately. It was bowing, not in fear, not in submission, but in recognition. The boy who had once been nothing, who had cleaned stables and swept floors, was now the chosen. The dragons knelt before him, acknowledging his courage, wisdom, and heart. The hunters froze, disbelief and terror in their eyes. They had faced dragons before, but never like this. Never one that answered to a human. Never a boy who commanded fire and wings with a power that seemed older than the stars. Kale felt a surge of strength within him, a connection deeper than anything he had imagined. The dragons trusted him. They had chosen him as their leader. Kale looked at the hatchling, now perched boldly on his shoulder, and smiled. "We did it," he whispered. "We are together." The hatchling chirped, wings flaring proudly. Around him, the dragons lowered their heads in unison, a river of scales and fire, a living acknowledgement of the bond between human and dragon. The hunters, realizing their defeat, retreated into the shadows, their weapons useless against such unity and power. Kale did not chase them. Today was not about vengeance, it was about recognition, trust, and the beginning of something greater. The dragons had returned, and he was their chosen guide. As night fell, Kale stood on the ridge, the hatchling beside him, massive dragons circling above. The stars glittered like sparks of fire, reflecting the power and majesty surrounding him. The whispers of the ancients filled the wind, soft and melodic, telling him of his destiny, of the world he would protect, of the lives he would touch. Cale realized that he had grown far beyond the boy who once swept stables. He had faced fire, shadow, and cunning. He had learned courage, leadership, and wisdom. He had passed every trial, faced every threat, and earned the trust of the dragons of legend. And now, the world would see what humans and dragons together could achieve. The hatchling nuzzled his neck, and Cale laughed softly, a sound of relief and triumph. "We're ready," he whispered. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The mountains echoed with roars and flapping wings, the dragons proclaiming their loyalty and strength. Cale understood then that he was no longer just a boy. He was a leader, a protector, a spark of fire in a world that had forgotten the power of humans and dragons. And somewhere, beyond the mountains, beyond the stars, other dragons watched, waiting for the day they too would kneel before him. Cale knew that his journey was far from over. There would be trials, dangers, and enemies. But for the first time he felt confident, alive, and powerful. The dragons of legend had returned. They had knelt before a boy who was nothing, until they chose him. Cale looked at the horizon, the stars reflecting in his eyes. The world was vast, dangerous, and full of wonders. And he would face it all, not as a stable boy, but as the master of dragons, the protector of the ancient fire, and the spark that could ignite a legend.